to go ahead. And so if possible, I don't know exactly how you want to go about this, and that part I'm not so particular about, but I think paying attention to what was often discussed while we were on the road trip is the recruiting, the educating teachers, the actual process of going through our teacher education programs and the costs associated with that, the retaining of our teaching staff, which we also heard is a significant issue, and then retraining them. I mean, there isn't a profession left in America. I shouldn't say there isn't a profession left. There are a few professions left, I would argue, in the United States where you enter into it. And when we know teachers get training along the way, but I hear too often about teachers having to absorb those costs. And if we're going to ask teachers to keep up with technology, keep up with changing practices, keep up with various things, then I think that we need to be mindful about, in many professions, I mean, yes, you do have to pay for that sometimes yourself, but people who are teachers, I would say that I would think they make a good argument that we should be at least helping to pay for some of that retraining as they go along the way, and perhaps some of the educating in the first place. So there's that part. I'm sorry to bring up a tough subject, but regarding the PERS obligations that exist out in the districts, there's some variation, but very few don't have that significant responsibility. And I don't need an answer, but at some point, I would like to hear how we're going to be working with school districts, directing them, et cetera, about how they're going to be managing the PERS obligations and the growing healthcare costs that all of the public sector is experiencing. So we don't have to have a comment on it, I just want to understand that.
But so you do know I know there's at least one hearing, in capital construction where there's been some conversations about this, there's another one tomorrow.
Yes, I'm aware of the fact that because I passed the joy of what I had in the last legislative session with all the PERS hearings. I'd said, you know what, it was really enjoyable. So I, thought it would be great for the down in capital construction to.
You wanted to share the joy.
I find it my responsibility to continue the conversation there. When we are talking about doubling the anti-poverty, I'm in complete support that it doesn't cost the same amount of money to educate all children, and so I support that. Right now in the school funding formula, you probably have people looking at this, but there already is a distribution occurring in that way. And I just want to make certain that there are, not to say that there's any question of how they could spend the money, but to make certain that we don't say, oh yeah, here's this additional funds and they're spending it within it's like what exactly, how you use money when it's trying to address some other things around poverty. Because what I'm not seeing in here, and what I'm leading to is, where is it talking about the social services and the things that are going on, that the services that people need, wraparound services, et cetera. I know we have the mental health component in it, but when we're talking about schools having food pantries and we're talking about kids needing additional supports everywhere from early childhood all the way through high school, I just wasn't sure. And then there's probably an answer somewhere. And the last thing is that Senator Roblin mentioned about the other bills, and maybe I missed something along the way about the other bills that could affect the work of the committee. I'll leave it that way. It would be just great at some point to get a summary of understanding that. Maybe that's my own responsibility, and that's fine. But if there are other bills that are going to be impacting, to be addressing some of these things, and I know Senator Roblin's working on some, and so I just would think that would be helpful to understand that whole picture. That's all. Thank you.
That's all very useful. Just a couple things.